The Marlins take the series against the Brewers. They are right in the thick of it. We record this on Monday. It's Monday's episode, and the Diamondbacks have just lost to the Yankees. This is one hell of a wild card race, and the Marlins are in the thick of it. 6 games to go. Can they win them all? This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. This is your daily Marlins podcast. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. If you are listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe and leave a review. This is your team every day, and thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. It is the Monday episode, 25th of September. Yes, we are still in September, and yes, we are talking about relevant Marlins baseball. There is a YouTube channel also, guys. Make sure you head over there, hit subscribe. Also, if you are watching, you will see, you know the drill by now. It's Monday, and it's the final Monday of the regular season. And the UK GOAT is in the house. Sean Barrett, how are we doing?
I'm not too bad. I must be mistaken. I thought this was going to be Locked On Yankees. I spent the whole day following along and watching the game and tweeting along with it. I haven't had time since the final to go and wash that filth off of me. But
yeah, that's filth.
We'll move over to the Marlins quite quickly and clean ourselves up a bit.
I saw a great tweet, actually, that someone put out just saying just how wild it is that all of a sudden, as a fan base, the Marlins are on an off day, the Yankees are playing, they're playing the Diamondbacks, big kind of impact in terms of this wild card race. And, you know, for us to all be squirreling over to go and watch this random day game happening in New York, the Yankees completely out of it. They've got no fans in the ballpark because it was supposed to be played on Saturday. Delayed game. It was, I think, an Aaron Judge bobblehead game. It was a sellout. They get about 1,000 fans in there, and somehow the Yankees go on to win it. Just wild. But he's saying just how much of a better fan experience it is to have this feeling in the final week, where we're literally not just scoreboard watching, we're literally watching our competitors play live, hoping they lose. And right now on Monday, the Diamondbacks have just lost, mate. So this is new. This feels new, right?
Incredibly new, yes. This is not something that we're used to. Late September baseball. I mean, it's going to creep into October. Marlins are going to hopefully at that point still be playing relevant baseball in October, the final game of the season. If there's still stakes on that final day, the nerves are going to be huge. But that's why we're fans of baseball, isn't it? And you know, some of us have been around for far too long to very rarely experience this. So yeah, this is a lot of fun for me, you, and for everyone that's following along with the Marlins through the hard times. Yeah,
absolutely. I've only known the rebuild, to be honest with you. So apart from 2020, but this is the first 162 experience. I'm, you know, just sitting back and reflecting on that. I need to tell you about the show sponsor as well in a second. I've gone off script already, but you know, I'm getting giddy here. But a 162 experience of a team that's kind of in it, what I would say is, boy, oh boy, you invest a lot of emotion and a lot of everything into a 162 run where you're like the Marlins have been in this all the way. They had the highs, they had the lows, but they've always been kind of like in the wild card. Clearly, like the division was never in play. But from a wild card perspective, they've kind of always floated around that since very early on. And so it's been what I would describe as a pretty exhausting 162 because like you're living and breathing like every game, like even those ones in May, early May, and like you're living and breathing it then. And, you know, when you've had to go right through into September and into October, and then let's hope a postseason appearance as well. You look back and you think, boy, we've invested a lot into this season mentally, I think emotionally, and I'd be interested to know the watch hours and the number of tweets during this season too. It'd be pretty high, right?
Yeah, I mean, the time alone is obviously, we still watch an awful lot of baseball, even when the Marlins lose 90, 100 games. That's just the animals that we are. But you get a sort of apathy, don't you, once you get to 80, 90, 100 losses, like you're watching the games, but how upset can you be at yet another loss?
Nah,
But
exactly.
you're right. Every game matters. Every win matters. Every time you win, you think you can go on a run. Every time you lose, you think that's it, season's over. But your emotions are up and down like a roller coaster for the whole season for 6 months. By the time we get to the off season, I genuinely think we're going to need an off season.
Oh boy, that is right. But I don't want the offseason to come just yet. I don't. I want it to keep on rolling. And the reality is they got 6 games to go. They're all on the road, which kind of makes me slightly nervous because, you know, for everyone listening to the show, they know I've called it out last couple of weeks. When the Marlins are home, they're playing really good ball at home. They actually have played great at home all year. It's funny because for a few years, they were just absolutely terrible at home. They couldn't get anything done. But this year in particular, they've played really well. On the road, it's not been quite the same. That does make me nervous, the final week, the final 2 series on the road. But before we really get into this episode, I better let you know who's sponsoring this episode. My superiors will be shouting at me for running late on this one. But this episode is sponsored by Sleeper. And you could swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you could win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use the promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. You can check out Sleeper today. More about those guys later on as well, I think, if I have read my ad reads correctly. Anyway, Sean, the Marlins, they had the Brewers this weekend. And the Brewers had just spanked the Marlins, I would say, in that 4-game series just before. Their rotation, we were into the teeth of the rotation. Burns heading it up, Woodruff, and Peralta. It looked a tough ask. Me and Craig Mish were talking about this series in advance. Craig's view was probably 1 of 3 would be okay. You know, Craig's magic number of the final 9 was 6 games. But now they've taken 2 of 3 against the Brewers. And they lost the first one emphatically. But in some ways, I think they took the next 2 kind of emphatically as well in their own kind of different ways. But, you know, this series win, I think the Marlins deserved it. I think they played overall the better ball, which is impressive considering the Brewers are literally trying to seal the division. I know they pretty much have it locked up, so maybe there's, you know, the foot off the gas a touch, but this felt like, you know, the Marlins needed it. The Brewers wanted it too. The Marlins had to go against probably the best rotation that's active right now anyway, particularly in the NL. And to come out winning 2 or 3, mate, I think this is just, it's a huge result and huge testament to every single member of this Marlins team. And it just sums us up, right? Backs against the wall, no Sandy. Yuri goes down too. You know, bullpen game in there as well. They find a way to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, this team has shown through the season how resilient it can be. And I think I'm with Craig as far as I think that's the right amount of wins now. So now it's 4 out of 6. Go 4-2. You've got the tiebreaker over both of the 2 teams in the Cubs and the Diamondbacks. So they're both going to have to go 4-2 or better. Well, even if they go 4-2, then we have the tiebreak. So I think 4-2 going from now would be perfect. So those 2 wins are huge because you never want to go in chasing 5-1 because like you can be as confident as you want to be. That's probably unlikely.
Yeah.
Coming off the back of the Mets loss series, then get absolutely spanked in the first game against the Brewers. Like at that moment, if you'd asked me how I was feeling about the season, it wouldn't have been very high.
No.
But both Luzardo and Eddie pitched well enough to get the wins, and the offense did literally just enough as well. You know, I wouldn't be expecting at this point the pitching or the hitting to be stellar because there's injuries here, they're banged up there. This is going to be a grind. If the Marlins are going to get to 4-2, they could squeak through maybe at 3-3. They're going to get through to the playoffs right now. They're going to have to grind their way through it because the season, it's been long for us as fans, but it's been even longer for the players. We're now seeing the cost of Sandy throwing all those innings, early pitching all those innings on a young arm. Luzardo, thank God he's still sticking there because his numbers are higher than his career by a long way. Garrett, the Marlins really are stretching the boundaries of what they've got inside this roster.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a grind right now.
Yeah, it really is. Like the thing is, though, this isn't just like unique to the Marlins too. As I'm looking around the league, all of a sudden, like the Braves, I think is a really good example. Like, I was kind of, as I always do, kind of, poke a little bit of fun towards Braves Twitter because it's such a fun fan base to engage with on Twitter. But the funny thing is all of a sudden, their rotation is looking a little bit wobbly and they're starting to lose a few games at this point. It's one of those where if you've already sealed everything up with 2 weeks to go, you take your foot off the gas. The next thing is a few injuries kick in. Then you think, man, can you reignite the gas once the postseason comes around? And you've got a 5-game series. Okay, I know they're pointing and going and saying, well, hey, what about Max Fried and Spencer Strider? Max Fried's on the IL at the moment. I know everyone's expecting Fried to roll back in and be fine. Strider, whilst he strikes everyone out, still gives up a ton of earned runs. I think his ERA is over 4. So, he's no guarantee. They've lost Morton. Next thing is I'm looking at the Braves and thinking, they have a little wobble here for a couple of games where their offense is cold. They can be bounced. The Bravos could easily be bounced here. And, it's the type of team like against the Phils. The Phils, they have the firepower to bounce the Bravos. Not to say that it's guaranteed the Phils will get through, but, a lot of clubs are dealing with it now. I think that's the point. Is like the pitching is being impacted. And I think just overall, like the change of rules, this pace the pitchers are having to work at, I think probably when we all sit back and reflect on it, it probably is impacting the health here and what's, it's the motion itself is a strain on the body. But when you're having to speed that up, minimizing the amount of recovery time between pitches, it's going to take its toll. I think we're just going to continue to see more of this happen. And so I do wonder if maybe in the future, maybe the rules are tweaked again slightly just to give a little bit more recuperation maybe to the pitching through this. I don't know. Any kind of broader thoughts on that one?
I think something's going to have to change because you've got a situation where you've got the starting pitchers going less and less innings. Like we talked about Sandy being that unicorn guy that's going to go 200 innings. He's going to go 7, 8, 9. We're now starting to reap that cost a little bit with the injury. And I think going forwards, there is going to be that transition where there are going to be less innings thrown by starting pitchers and more by relievers. And we've seen that trend for the last 10 years. We've also seen the trend of velocity with pitchers. Everyone's throwing 100, 101, 102, 103. Like, if there isn't a change in some way, whether it's roster sizes or whether the league's going to have to do something at a certain point, because you can't have your star players getting injured all the time. You look at what the NFL did with the quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are the face of the leagues. You're not allowed to touch them. They're literally red-shirted, essentially, to stop them from getting injured. Starting pitching in Major League Baseball is not quite as valuable in that way, but it's similar. And you can't just have every team's ace going out for 18 months because they've got to go and have Tommy John because they're throwing too many innings or they're throwing too quickly with these new rule changes. So it's interesting to see what happens. It might even be a case of the teams see that they've got this asset. Like, look at Uri then for the Marlins. All of a sudden, you're trying to increase his secondary stuff so that he doesn't have to throw such gas.
Yeah,
like, take a couple of miles off of it and condition your arm to save that arm a little bit. And that will happen slowly, very slowly, if it ever does happen. But yeah, arm injuries for pitching has always been an issue. But it does feel like the modern pitcher right now is more susceptible or put at more risk with the way that the rules have gone and the way the game has moved on with the velocity. So it'd be interesting to see what happens because I think all these injuries certainly don't help the league with what they give to the fans.
Yeah.
Like ultimately, it's an entertainment vehicle. They're trying to have as many eyeballs, and your stars help with that.
Yeah, for sure. Fundamentally, the league wanted more clubs in the postseason, and they wanted more teams competing for the postseason, which has worked this. Like, you got to look at it this year. Like, that has worked. But when you're there, you want the stars of the game to be on the field too. You're not looking, ideally, you don't want Sandy Alcantara and Yuri Perez missing. That means that the Marlins are having to turn to maybe a bullpen game, with Chargois starting and Sean Reynolds or something coming in. And you're thinking, man, this is not quite what we were looking for here. So I'm intrigued. I think it's an intriguing situation. We're going to talk about what it means for the Marlins because the last episode I recorded on Friday, I was looking back at the start that Sandy Alcantara had, thinking, this looks positive. And since then, it was probably emergency podcast territory, but I've held it out to now. So we're going to talk about Sandy and talk about Yuri Perez too. Equally, you mentioned him too, Eddie Cabrera. We need to talk about the arms because these injuries and the innings limit maybe that Yuri Perez has faced into, it was essential that Eddie Cabrera could step up. And to be fair to him, he has. So we're going to talk about that shortly. But this episode, and listen, sound the klaxon, baby. It's a new sponsor. I love new sponsors. How about that? And it's our good friends over at DoorDash. Yes, sir. You love the convenience of getting what you want right to your door. With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can stock up for the week or order last-minute cravings conveniently. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites. Now you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers too. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or we'll make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them yourself. Want even more? Well, you can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery free fee on all eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. So get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to $20 value when you use the code LOCKEDONMLB at checkout. Limited time offer. Terms do apply. That's 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code LOCKEDONMLB. Don't forget, the code is LOCKEDONMLB for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. Okay, it's Monday, the 25th of September. You're joining me, Peter Pratt, and the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett. Before we talk about current arms, it's right for us, Sean, to remember a favorite arm of this organization. 7-year anniversary to the day for the passing of Jose Fernandez. For those that haven't heard this story before, I've only ever been to Lone Depot or Marlins Park back then once. I've only ever seen one Marlins game live. It was in May 2016. I didn't know anything about the Marlins at that point, but pitching that day was Jose Fernandez. This is the only starting pitcher for the Marlins I've ever seen live. Jose Fernandez holds a very special place in all Marlins' hearts, and particularly yours, Sean, as well. You only have to look at your Twitter profile to know that. So, this is always a hard time when we have to reflect, look back, remember Jose. But I know we did this last year, but equally it's good to ask the same questions. What Jose means and meant to you as a Marlins fan.
Yeah, he is and will always be my favorite player. And I try my best to look at it positively because it is still evidently very painful for me. He brought me back. So 2012, the Toronto trade, I kind of gave up on the Marlins and baseball because my understanding was that Loria and Sampson had no interest in winning baseball. They had no interest in. They had an asset that would make them money no matter what they did. So I kind of gave up. And then 2013 season starts, and in comes Jose Fernandez, and he's absolutely electric. He's absolutely fantastic. And for me, it's not what he brought to the game on the field; it's what he brought off the field. Yep. His excitement, his enthusiasm, his enjoyment of baseball. It was so infectious, and it brought me back to baseball. His passing evidently is still very painful for me, but I try to look back at it in a positive manner because he is, to me, what baseball should be about. It's a fun and the enjoyment. He played the game like a kid. He played the game like a kid, and that's how I try to watch baseball, play baseball, talk about baseball with the eyes of a child who loves this game of baseball.
No doubt. Electric guy, electric dude, electric on the field, just, one in a million, to be honest with you. And everyone speaks so fondly about him. I remember talking with Glenn Geffner on Fish Across the Pond years ago. And, asked him, what's who's your favorite Marlin? And he didn't take long to think about it and to answer. He was straight out like, Jose. There's never been anyone like him. And, huge, loss for many people, many families, for the fans, for the club, for baseball. Still raw, I think. And there's a lot of images, I think, that just come into your mind when you think of that situation. And for me, I always just think of that D. Gordon home run. That just it's crazy the way the world works. The way, D was, and we see the home run. And for those that maybe don't remember this situation, D actually went out there with, I think, Jose's helmet on and took like the first pitch of the at bat, like stood at the other side of the batter's box. And then for him dealing with all this emotion to then hit one out, it's absolutely insane, to be honest with you. Right? For me, every time I watch that video and that home run, always brings a tear to my eye every single time. But the sheer emotion, it's just crazy the way the world works like that, where D. Gordon could blast one out, mate. And just tough situation for everyone involved in that. And still, what would Jose's career look like? It would just, how many Cy Youngs could, Jose Fernandez have had? He probably wouldn't have been a Marlin, considering where we've been at with our development and rebuilds and whatnot. But I'm sure he would have been living his best life, and likely would have locked down a couple of Cy Youngs. To be honest with you, he was, what a fabulous pitcher for sure, mate. And gone too soon, unfortunately. But there's many images that do come into my mind. Is there anything, even like a game, a moment, something in particular that really kind of, when you think of Jose Fernandez, is like, bang, that's what you think of?
There's a clip. I'm pretty certain it was Tulowitzki hit a line drive but up the middle,
mm-hmm.
and Jose snags it, and Tulo looks at him in shock and just goes, "Did you catch that?" And you could just see that it's such a nice moment between the two of them. Just again, the happiness that baseball can bring you. He genuinely enjoyed the game so much. And you're right. He probably wouldn't be a Marlin right now. He'd probably be in pinstripes or out in LA somewhere. But Cy Young awards, at least two.
Absolutely.
And I don't even think that's a biasy. Just like if there are younger fans or fans that haven't been a Marlins fan for a long time, go and have a look at his stats. They are just electric numbers. And he was growing every year. He was growing in his development, as you'd expect, obviously. But he came out of the chute in 2013. Rookie of the year, obviously, was immense.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting, right? Because we've had Yuri Perez this season, who's called up in advance of what you'd expect, but at times looked electric also. Like, different type of personality though, right? Like that's the thing, is like Jose's personality, the way he held himself, on and off the field, and, lived life to its fullest, let's say. And, was just a bundle of energy. Yuri Perez is a different character, clearly, but on the field though, there must be some comparisons you draw perhaps to, young dude coming up and, making himself at home on the biggest of stages. And, I think it's interesting that the Marlins maybe have another guy in a similar mold. It's crazy that Yuri Perez is only 20. It completely astounds me, to be honest with you. So what kind of parallels do you draw between Yuri Perez and Jose Fernandez?
He absolutely deserves it for his on-the-field performance. He does deserve that comparison. Personality-wise, it's different. We've seen a bit of personality from him, and he seems like he'll grow into that, I think. A bit like Sandy. Sandy was super quiet when he first came over. So I think we'll see some growth from him. The only reason I've stopped myself from making that comparison is because I remember, it might not have been on here, it might have been on Fish Across the Pond, but we talked about Sixto and how exciting he was. And I think I didn't quite go with a comparison, but I came close to it. And then we saw what happened. So I feel like, for me, and I expect him to continue to perform the way he's performed. I think he is an electric arm. I think he is the real deal. But I think ultimately comparing anybody to Jose Fernandez is unfair because you're comparing him against quite literally a ghost. You can't compare people to Jose simply because he's got that, he's in our heads in a way that no player can ever deliver on. So I think his talent, his ability is going to be really exciting to watch over the next couple of years. But
agreed.
I think there needs to be a distinction between the real and the past.
Yep. Well said, sir. Well said. Let's do our final ad, and then let's talk about some modern day pitching. I particularly want to talk about Eddie Cabrera. We're running long on this episode, longer than expected, but that's partly down to my time management, which always seems to be off. Nevertheless, this episode is brought to you by Sleeper, and the Major League Baseball playoffs are around the corner, and your Miami Marlins are in the thick of it, which means the clock is ticking on your chance to 100 times up your cash on daily fantasy baseball. Baseball has never been more exciting than it is now, with studs like Acuna, like Betts and Ohtani. Someone needs to change the script here. Someone does. Come on. Anyway, pick more or less on stats for these stars like home runs, hits, strikeouts, and more for up to 100 times payout on Sleeper. Get your picks right, and you could win big time. Here's what you got to do. You got to use this promo code if you're listening. Promo code is locked on, and you'll get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Okay, final segment here. Monday's episode with the UK GOAT Sean Barrett and myself, Peter Pratt. Sean, when you talk about Eddie Cabrera, for me, the pressure was on, and there was a few moments in that Brewers game where it was flashes of greatness, is almost as how I would describe it with Eddie Cabrera. There was a specific pitch to Christian Yelich. I believe it was nearly a 96-mile-an-hour changeup for strike 3. Christian Yelich swung the bat, didn't get anywhere near it. He looked like he was swinging a bat blindfolded. That's how beaten he was. Yelich, turned around, strolled to the dugout. He didn't know where he was. He looked like Ozzie Albies against the Marlins in that game 1. He looked drunk. That's what Eddie Cabrera was making guys look. He was making Christian Yelich look drunk at the plate. He was that good. Sean, Eddie Cabrera has had a very up and down year, it's fair to say. But in probably the biggest spot when the Marlins truly needed him, just how impressed have you been with the way that Eddie's been able to come up and deliver for this club and just keep it rolling, because they need arms and they need quality innings badly. So for me, this is huge.
Yeah, innings is the main thing for me. So he went 5 innings and then 5 and a third in the previous game against the Mets. That's the most length he's given the Marlins in back-to-back starts since back in June. The walks, we talked about the walks, and he was in a weird stretch where it was 6 walks, 2 walks, 6 walks, 1 walk. He was like a good game, bad game, good game, bad game. 2 back-to-back games of 2 walks and 1 walk. Like that's his area. We know the stuff's good. Like as you said, he made Yelich look stupid. 3 strikeouts in the game for Yelich as well. He had a really tough game as well. Yeah. So I mean, at this point, 5 and a third, 5 and 2/3. That's kind of what the Marlins need from Eddie. If they could get 6 out of him, that would be fantastic. But 5 innings, 1 or 2 walks. He's going to get a Cape 9 at least. That's where the Marlins are now. You've got to look at every single start and say, like, what can you realistically expect from these guys? Like, yes, I'd love these guys to go 7, 8, 9 innings and all that kind of stuff, but it's not going to happen. So for me, that's where Eddie's lane is. And then obviously at this point, with the way the arms are, he is a wildcard series starting pitcher for the Marlins.
He is. That was going to be my question, mate, is, listen, if we make this wildcard series, it's obviously, 3-game series, so we may not need 3, in a good way and maybe a bad way, but, it's possible the Marlins get a sweep done. I don't know, but let's assume there's 3 starters required. Eddie Cabrera is going to be pitching in one of those 3 games. I mean, it'll depend on who they've had to use maybe in the final in the 162 and how the arms line up, because the reality is the Marlins can't cruise this in. They'll have to go. They've got 6 games to go. They've effectively got 3 starters to somehow, and then they've got to try and piece together probably 2 bullpen games in there as well to keep it rolling. You know, it's such a tough ask, but a 3-game series, Eddie Cabrera's pitching in there, right? Like it's nailed on at this point. No Sandy, no Yuri, no Trevor Rogers. Cueto, they've clearly kind of deviated away from. He's now back into mop-up duty. Cabrera's in.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be Luzardo, Cabrera, and Garrett. I mean, depends on which way around you want to do it. I mean, if Eddie's not the number 3 and the Marlins sweep or get swept, then obviously he wouldn't be a pitcher for them. But I think, to expect a 2-win sweep, I mean, I'd love it. But realistically, the Marlins are going to need all 3, especially with the bullpen is going to be tested over that series, because
it is. Apart
from Luzardo, who you might be able to squeak 6 out of, the other 2 are, again, expectations. They're going to go 4 or 5 innings, especially in playoff baseball.
Yeah.
Like if you start a game and Luzardo struggles through 2 innings, clearly hasn't got it, then you have to make a move.
Yeah.
It's not a case of, if you're struggling in the first 2 innings, you're going to lose this game. Can't think like that in the playoffs. Every game is a must-win game, so it will be really challenging if the Marlins struggle early in a game, because we see what happens in playoff baseball. You make that move, you end up using arms that maybe you don't want to use every single day. But the bullpen's going to get tested in that situation, because the Marlins simply don't have a trustable long man. Like if you've got 5 guys in your rotation and one of your guys clearly doesn't have it, you bring in your 4th or 5th starter.
Exactly.
Marlins,
they haven't got that either of them.
It's Cueto. Like, I'd trust Luzardo on a bad day over Cueto on a good day. So, all 3 will definitely be needed for sure.
But they absolutely will be needed. You raise an interesting point about the bullpen. I think what we've seen with the pen in general recently is, the pattern has emerged now in terms of where we're up to. And what we know is Tanner Scott's getting the 9th, and he had a couple of wobbles, it's fair to say, in the last week, but he's back at it, which is great. Andrew Nardi's getting the 8th, and the 7th kind of depends, but it seems like Robertson seems to have kind of fell into that role, a little bit kind of Anthony Bassi, where didn't work in the 9th, getting back in the 7th. And actually, and this is what I said when we were kind of picking the bones out of what's gone wrong here with Robertson. It was like Robertson was never supposed to be the closer for the Mets. He just ended up having to do it because, no one else was around that could. But Robertson's best role is maybe away from the 9th. And actually the 7th maybe is perfect for him. And so, listen, the trade itself, when you look back and you go, the Marlins were trying to add a closer, a shutdown closer, and maybe Robertson felt like the best one available. What they've maybe ended up doing is finding the best closer available, but he was already in-house. And actually what they've added is the best 7th inning guy available, because they probably didn't want to go back to Anthony Bass at this point. So it may work out. Crazily, it may work out in a decent way. Robertson seems to have settled down. Let me just ask you, and we'll finish this episode here on this topic. What has happened to AJ Puk? I lost my mind the other night, where Puk again gave up another home run. It was a game-tying home run, a 3-run blast. The Marlins did end up managing to find a way to win that game. But man, oh man, it was a massive spot, big spot in the season. AJ Puk, another bomb. Like, I have no idea what's happened to AJ Puk, but the drop-off has just been, it's been so steep. But the reality, going back to what we talked about, though, we're going to need Puk in a lot of high-leverage spots, and maybe multi-innings Puk as well, to try to eat up some innings. Like, I'm intrigued to see, do they maybe push the ticket with Puk? Do they maybe push the ticket with Matt Moore? Not to segue you into another guy, but, Matt Moore has had experience of starting. He actually looked good on yesterday's game in particular, I must say. But AJ Puk, mate, I'm left scratching my head on what 2023 has been for him. I actually have no answers. Do you have any?
I don't. I mean, that home run per 9 is super high, and the home run to fly ratio is quite inflated as well. So he's got It's hard to say unlucky because sometimes you look at the guy's home run to fly ratio and go, "Oh, they're just getting unlucky. Every fly ball's leaving the park." But there's a reason why every fly ball's leaving the park. If you leave a meatballs over the middle,
this is
it's got to the point where now, like in the playoffs again, specifically when games are going to be close, they're going to be tight. I mean, we're Marlins fans, we're used to tight games. All these one run wins and one losses. Try and get that one out. have been the storyline for a couple of years now for the Marlins. So they're going to be close games. So a guy giving up home runs in leverage spots is going to cost the Marlins games. And Robertson, you're right. He's found a home in the 7th inning, but he's also pitched really well. So September, sub 2.5 ERA.
Yep, he has
pitched really well. And we spoke a couple of weeks ago about him and saying that yes, he didn't deliver in the closer role, but he's going to have a role. He's going to have a job. He's going to contribute to wins for the Marlins. And so far, through the month of September, he's pitched in a positive way. So
definitely.
At what point do you go, do I trust Robertson over Puck? And that might sound a bit perverse because he really wasn't good in leverage spots. But it's getting to the point where Puck's starting to play himself out of those leverage spots. Just so lucky right now for the Marlins that Scott's delivering in that closer role because
no doubt
he seems to have just taken that and run with it. So that's a really good thing to see. Like again, the leverage pen's been used so much, as has the whole bullpen over the whole of the season. Again, the season's long, so it would be a shame if the season comes down to struggling because they've been overused. But ultimately, that's again the nature of the modern day baseball, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
You can go into a season saying you've got too many arms, and then you get to September and you're scratching. So the only solace we can have, as you said earlier, is every team's dealing with this right now.
Yep.
It's just about grinding your way through these wins and seeing where we land. Because look, no matter what happens now, the Marlins get swept in the next 2 series, go 0-6 and burn out at the end. I've still had a fantastic season.
I have too.
And the growth from some of the younger players, some of the development, first year of Skip, it's been fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I see enough to show that next year can actually still be better, even with the potential losses of Soler and maybe Sandy. Let's hope not. There's a lot of development on the younger end of this team that show a lot of excitement for next year. So let's enjoy this. It's late September. We're competing for the playoffs. But if they don't quite make it, I've still had a hell of a ride.
I also have, we started this episode talking about this topic, 162. It's been a wild ride because of all those 1-run dubs. There's been so much voodoo sprinkled in there. I'm stunned actually. The Marlins aren't already in. They feel like they've been the luckiest team in the history of baseball somehow, and still haven't claimed their spot. I'm just going to put it on record now, finish this episode here, and we're actually going with a double header here. Sean's back for the Tuesday episode as well, so we're going to carry on this conversation, which everyone will be pleased about as well. But I'm going to put it on record right now. I just can't see a way where the Marlins don't make it. It just feels written. One of them situations where you look back and you go, the Marlins are making this. The way the bounce of the ball's been, the way things have happened, they're gonna have to do it the tough way, the hard way, and they've run out of arms. They got basically a 3-man rotation or a 2.5-man rotation. They've got a closer and a few other bullpen arms. They're trying their best. Arias is in a walking boot. Jay Berger's got a quad issue. They're banged up. Everyone's banged up, but it's written. It's written that the Marlins are going to make it, and it's probably not going to be that pretty this week, to be honest with you. But 6 games to go. And, imagine if the Marlins just stroll into New York and sweep the Mets or something. That would put the cat amongst the pigeons. And they may need to. Who knows? Who knows what the other clubs do? But I just think the way things are going this year, the Marlins are getting in. And frankly, when they're in, anything can happen. Anything can happen. Sean, that's been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me on Monday's episode of Locked on Marlins. As I've already mentioned and teased out, we are going to be back on Tuesday. We have got a Tuesday episode coming. We will look very similar to what we are looking like right now, because we're probably going to hit record in about 5 minutes' time as well. But nevertheless, thank you for joining us on Monday's episode, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. See you then.